I'd like to welcome everybody here today. I want to thank you all for attending. And in particular, I want to thank the speakers that are going to come in a little bit. And I want to thank our panelists for joining us today as we convene to discuss housing instability and COVID-19. Unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic journey continues. It is not a road that we like to travel, but it's a road that we've been given to travel. So we don't have much of a choice. But along that road, we've learned a few things. And one of the things that we have learned, and I think we've learned fairly well, is that together we can make a difference. And it's great to see the crowd that we have here today. Dating back to March, when this all first started, the Greater Lowell Community Foundation has awarded $2.8 million to various nonprofits in the Greater Lowell area. Those dollars came from a variety of sources, from checks, large and small, from individuals, from businesses, and from a variety of foundations that have supported the philanthropic work of the foundation in our area. And in particular, I'd like to note of an envelope that I opened up just a couple of weeks ago that is along the lines of how things have gone, and hopefully they will continue to go. And it included a check for $75,000 from an anonymous foundation in Massachusetts. And it said, this is for food insecurity. In addition to the 75, there was a few extra bucks in there, and it said, this is for overhead, because they were aware of the fact that of the $2.8 million that we did granted, we took zero for overhead against that amount. 100% of the dollars we received was 100% of the dollars that went out the door. So we were grateful for that extra dollars. What the foundation did in turn with that 75 is we took $75,000 of what we'd already raised, canvassed our Greater Lowell area, and just a week or so ago, awarded $150,000 as we matched it with $75,000 to 13 nonprofit agencies in the Greater Lowell area. As we continue down this particular road that we're on, I am hopeful that the partnerships and the generosity of the folks that have been at the table before will continue. Because fundamentally, and certainly on this road, life is all about friends helping friends, reaching out, helping each other in any way we possibly can. And if you want to reach out to GLCF, you can find us. Just Google us. It's simple enough. We're here. But reach out to somebody. Reach out to another nonprofit. There are many on this call here today that are doing fabulous work in the space here that we are working within. And the space that we're working within is going to be a difficult one as we continue, because as I read an article just the other day, it was a little sobering. And as it said, a tidal wave of evictions is expected to rip millions of Americans from their homes when the federal ban expires at the end of the year, and has already started in Massachusetts and across the US. As many know, since the ban in Mass expired on October 17th, eviction notices have doubled every single week. A year or so ago, a number of folks that are on this call, some of the nonprofits, in the city, we worked in 2019 with the foundation as well to create a homeless action plan. And the homeless action plan, as you might imagine, was to identify homeless in the Greater Lowell community and to find how and implement the perspective of housing first, and find housing for people that do not have homes. Here we are less than a year later on a call where we're going to try to figure out as best we possibly can with all the different players we've got here, how do we keep people in their houses so they don't end up on the streets that are homeless? The other end of that particular paradigm. Certainly, American families are desperately in need of economic relief. We have got a couple of folks that you're going to hear from in a moment that have been working that particular angle for some period of time. And I'd first like to introduce United States Representative Laurie Trahan. Laurie was elected in 2018 and serves the 3rd District. Laurie was born and raised in a working class family in Lowell and was the first in her family to graduate from college. So it's no surprise that she is a champion of the middle class, supporting education, healthcare, jobs, the economy, and women's rights, among other things. Laurie, of course, was a major supporter of the CARES Act and is working very hard with her colleagues in Congress to hopefully pass a much needed another federal stimulus package in the near term. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Congresswoman Laurie Trahan.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Jay, for that kind introduction and certainly for the great work you and your team have been doing at the Greater Lowell Community Foundation, especially in these trying times. You know, as a former board member of the foundation, I'm not the least bit surprised at the way you all have stepped up when our community needed you most and have actively convened important discussions like this one. Also want to congratulate you on receiving the Chamber's 2020 Steve Jones Community Champion Award just yesterday for going above and beyond. We all know that your work has a lasting impact on our region, and we're all grateful and looking forward to our continued partnership. You know, I was asked to provide a brief overview of where we stand with respect to housing assistance in Congress. But before getting into those details, I'll do a little table setting, I think, to start. You know, as I imagine most of you know, the crisis in affordable housing was with us long before COVID. But the pandemic has accelerated the challenge. Lives are literally at stake if we don't take proper action. Across the Commonwealth, nearly 250,000 households pay more than half of their monthly income on rent. And a worker earning the minimum wage would need to work more than 80 hours per week to afford a one-bedroom apartment. Nationwide, more than a third of households over 40 million are renters, and 1 in 4 was paying more than 50% of their income on housing, according to Harvard's Joint Center for Housing Studies. But COVID has put many of these folks out of work, especially those who are in positions that simply cannot be performed in a virtual environment, our servers, cashiers, our retail sales staff. And it's heightened the risk for those who are already among the most vulnerable, the poor and the elderly, those who rely on public housing or have a Section 8 voucher. There's no Plan B for many of them. The CARES Act, which became law back in March, included an eviction moratorium that ran through July. The House passed another big relief package in May, the HEROES Act, which would have extended that moratorium by a year. But when the Senate didn't step up to the plate, it fell to the CDC to unilaterally extend the eviction moratorium through the end of this year. However, you know, we cannot rely on administrative actions to address the scale of the challenge before us. It's going to take congressional action, as well as our state partners like Senator Kennedy, to provide the necessary support for the months ahead. In the US House, we scaled back the HEROES Act by about $1 trillion in October. And we did that to demonstrate our willingness to negotiate with the White House and the Senate. But even in the leaner version, we were still able to include over $20 billion to assist homeowners who are struggling to pay their mortgage, more than $50 billion in emergency rental assistance to help low-income families avoid eviction and pay their utility bills, plus additional aid for those living in public housing, and another round of state and local aid, including $68 million for the city of Lowell. To be honest, you know, when I came to Congress, it really wasn't ever my plan to advance a federal ban on evictions, let alone pass multi-trillion-dollar bills that will add to our country's debt. But we are in uncharted waters. The federal government can and does run annual deficits. In fact, we are in the red to the tune of over $27 trillion and counting at the moment. Now, I'm disappointed, as many of you are, that we failed to use the last few years of the post-recession recovery to address the deficit, as we did during the Clinton years. That would have been the responsible thing to do. Instead, this president passed a big tax cut that was debt financed. We need to get back to responsible budgeting, but with low interest rates, the priority for now must be our recovery. And because nearly every state must balance its budget, it's up to the federal government to help. As it stands today, the House and Senate leadership are negotiating another relief package. In fact, just yesterday, Senator McConnell agreed that we should pass another bill before the end of the year, which was welcome news since he's been the primary obstacle to us getting to yes, even more than the White House, to tell the truth. My colleagues and I will continue to push to ensure that robust housing assistance and state and local aid are part of any agreement. But before I close, I do want to thank a few people who are also on this call. I want to thank and commend Larry Curtis and the WinnDevelopment team for stepping up and committing to supporting your tenants and residents who were facing pandemic-related financial burdens. You know, your leadership shines a light on how even during times of adversity, we can get through this as a community together. So thank you. And additionally, I want to thank Carl Howell, Connie Martin, and I saw Karen Frederick too, for all you and your team at Community Teamwork continue to do day in and day out, especially in these challenging times, to ensure that the residents of Greater Lowell and the Merrimack Valley have access to economic opportunity and the vital services, housing assistance, small business guidance and growth opportunities and resources to benefit our local economy. So I want to thank you all for joining this important conversation today. I can't stay for the entire thing, but I certainly look forward to continuing our work with all of you on this important issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laurie. It is now my pleasure to welcome Massachusetts State Senator Ed Kennedy. Ed Kennedy, a lifelong resident of Lowell, began his political career with a seat on the city council in 1977. Were you a teenager at that time, Ed?
Yeah, yes. I was in grammar school.
From which he served 4 terms. And then in 2011 was elected to a 5th term. And then in 2016, he was elected as mayor. In 2018, Ed Kennedy was elected to the Massachusetts State Senate to represent the 1st Middlesex District. Ed is also a major champion of the middle class and the working families, champion of education and the environment and economic development. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our State Senator, Ed Kennedy.
Thank you very much, Jay. I'm happy to be with you here today and with everybody. I'd like to wish everybody a good morning and thank you for inviting me to be part of this. Before I begin, I would just like to say that I'd like to express my thanks to Congresswoman Lori Trahan. I think she's doing a great job down there in Washington for the district, and certainly it gives our district a loud and clear voice down in Washington, and I just want to thank her for all that she's doing down there. I think the housing crisis for me is I have a somewhat unique position in that previously in my life I've spent time as a tenant, and I've also spent time as a small landlord. And I know that right now the fear of eviction is very high across the Commonwealth. I think the latest survey indicated that there were more than 160,000 households in Massachusetts that had housing debt, which is really bad. And I think, as you mentioned, Jay, earlier, evictions are up. I think last week there were like 689 eviction cases filed in the Commonwealth, which is up 15% from the early months of 2020 before the pandemic hit. The Commonwealth has put significant resources into assisting tenants and landlords during the COVID-19 pandemic in an effort to avoid an eviction crisis. In our region, such programs as the residential assistance for families in transition and the emergency rental and mortgage assistance are administered through Community Teamwork, and I know that we'll be hearing from them later on this morning. The state Senate, in passing the FY21 budget last week, invested $540 million in funding for rental assistance, homelessness prevention, voucher programs, public housing authorities, and homeless shelters. It requires landlords who begin an eviction proceeding to ensure that their tenants receive a document that outlines their legal rights and resources, which must include a notice making it clear that only a judge can order someone to leave their home. It pauses an eviction proceeding when tenants apply for RAFT, the state's main rental assistance program, and creates a task force to track the administration's eviction diversion initiative outcomes and make recommendations on how to improve its effectiveness, efficiency, and reach. Back in October, on October 12th, the governor unveiled his eviction diversion initiative plan, which was $171 million in total commitment in fiscal year 21 and $112 million in new funding that was designed to help out in several different areas. So I think the Commonwealth has done a lot. I'm not sure that we're doing enough. I think that there's just so much that needs to be done, but certainly in addition to the pandemic itself and trying to keep the economy afloat, housing is a very, very critical piece and something that everybody has to pay a lot of attention to. So I'm very happy that we're having this forum here this morning. Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. I can stay on for a little bit, but I've got a Democratic caucus at 11, and we have formal session later on today, which will also be by Zoom, which is interesting in itself. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ed, and thank you so much for your leadership at the state level. It's greatly appreciated. Now it's my pleasure to introduce the moderator of the panel that we have here today, and that is Howell. Kyle has been with Community Teamwork since April of 2010. He is the Division Director of Housing and Homeless Services. In that role, he has developed and managed family shelters, rapid rehousing programming, domestic violence residential programming, youth services, and oversaw state and federal subsidized housing. These services have been recognized by many for their success and effectiveness. Kyle is a thoughtful and respected leader in our community, doing fabulous work. Kyle, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for being the moderator. Over to you.
Thank you, Jay. Good morning, everyone. I'm so appreciative to participate in this challenging discussion on housing instability in our community and the impact COVID-19 has on poverty, policy, and laws to address this growing concern. But first, I'd like to thank Congresswoman Trahan and State Senator Kennedy for their ongoing support. They have been much needed advocates for the services our community needs and have been tireless allies to Community Teamwork and other providers in our community. I would also like to thank the Greater Lowell Community Foundation for creating this platform and bringing together such an esteemed panel. Before I introduce our panelists for today's discussion, I just want to remind everyone of the program structure and some housekeeping notes. We will be posing questions to the panel and allowing each panelist to respond. If you have any questions for the panel, you can enter them into the chat, which is found at the bottom of your screen. Please make sure to send the chat to everyone to avoid your question from not being seen. And we will be reviewing the chat log for questions, and we will seek to get the panel to address these questions if time allows. In addition, please make sure you are muted at all times to avoid any sound interferences. The mute button is at the bottom left-hand side of your screen. When you are muted, there will be a red line through the image of the microphone. Thank you. Now I'd like to introduce our three panelists. Our first panelist is Larry Curtis, President and Managing Partner of WinnDevelopment. Larry has led a full range of real estate development and acquisition activities for more than 30 years. He has been instrumental in helping WinnDevelopment grow from 3,000 units to more than 100,000 units across 23 states over the past 30 years. Our second panelist is Rachel Heller, Chief Executive Officer of Citizen Housing and Planning Association, also known as CHAPA. Rachel has been CEO since 2016 after joining the agency as the Director of Public Policy in 2012. Rachel is responsible for providing strategic leadership and overseeing all activities of the organization. She works in partnership with the Board of Directors to articulate and execute CHAPA's mission. Rachel previously worked as a Director of Public Policy at the Alliance for Business Leadership, served as Chief of Staff of Massachusetts State Senator Susan Tucker, and was the Senior Policy Advocate for Homes for Families, a nonprofit advocacy organization working to end family homelessness. Our third and final panelist is Connie Martin, Division Director of Energy and Community Resources at Community Teamwork, Inc. Connie oversees a $20 million budget that consists of federal, state, and private funds, and implements a wide range of programs that serves nearly 14,000 people annually. She was educated in the Lowell public school system, graduated from St. Michael's College in Vermont, and completed her master's in Education Administration at the University of Massachusetts at Lowell. During her career in nonprofit management, she has held positions in several different sectors, including arts and culture, business advocacy, workforce development, and child care programming. In addition to her position at Community Teamwork, Connie is serving her 11th term on the Lowell School Committee, and she volunteers with several local charities. Please welcome our three panelists for this program. Before we get into the first questions, I'd like to give the panelists the opportunity to give a brief overview of each of their organizations and the work they do in the community. Connie, could you lead us off, please?
Sure, absolutely, Carl. Thank you. For those of you who aren't familiar with Community Teamwork, we are, I guess, a triple threat. We function as a community action agency, which is the anti-poverty agency serving the greater Lowell community. We're also a community development corporation with all of the challenges and mission-driven activity that comes along with that, and also a regional housing agency. Overall, we're upwards of $100 million of programming that's administered by the agency every year in our annual budget. And we do function with basically three primary division areas. First is Housing and Homeless Services, which, as you know, Carl Howell, our esteemed moderator today, runs. We also run Child and Family Services, which is where our Head Start programming and child care programming resides. And then the final division, which is Energy and Community Resources, includes kind of the wraparound support services that we find our clients are so much in need of, including fuel assistance. Right now, rental assistance is one of our key program areas, financial education, volunteering services, and also small business assistance through our Entrepreneurship Center.
Thank you, Connie. Larry, could you please give us a brief overview of your organization?
Sure. Thanks, Carl, and thanks for the great work of CTI, and thanks, Connie, as well, and to the congressman who just jumped off, Congresswoman Trahan. I think we're all very fortunate that the city of Lowell and the district has her at the helm, doing great work in DC and locally, and we're proud to call her our congresswoman. So Win is an architect-led development firm. I'm an architect, I'm a planner. We're place-focused, creating great communities, not just housing. 1 out of 1,000 developers makes an attempt to build affordable housing. Everybody talks about it, but 1 out of 1,000 developers try. In relative to communities, most communities talk about affordable and workforce housing, but very few come together like the city of Lowell does, with great leadership at the State House, with in the legislature with Senator Kennedy at the helm there, and the representatives as well. So we operate all over the country. We're 100,000 apartment units, 500 plus apartment communities, employ 3,600 people throughout the country, 1,000 plus in Massachusetts, including a big office operation in Lowell, where we have a regional office. Some of our work in Lowell and the district is, I think, well known. The redevelopment of Boot Mills, the redevelopment of Loft 27 off in the Hamilton Canal District, the old CMMA building into Counting House Lofts, the old Adden Furniture building into similar community. All of these are mixed income communities, not just building housing for rich people, but building housing that are for people that are doing everything right. They're working hard, they're building lives for themselves and their families. And now in this time of COVID, they are impacted greatly. We're proud of the fact that early on in this epidemic, this pandemic, we voluntarily put forth a no eviction policy. We've just extended that along with some of our cohorts in the business through the end of March, and we hope that we can all work together to bring the federal and state resources, because we can't do it alone, to make and mitigate the impact that this horrible crisis has had on our buildings and, more importantly, our community. So I look forward to today's conversation. I look forward to our discussion about building affordable housing, workforce housing, historic redevelopment, work with housing authorities, all of what we need to help continue to solve this crisis of affordable housing and workforce housing in our region and in this country. So thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Rachel, could you give a background on your organization as well, please? Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Jay. And also thank you to Congresswoman Trahan and Senator Kennedy for your great leadership on and commitment to affordable housing and homelessness prevention. CHAPA is a statewide nonprofit organization that brings together multiple stakeholders in the affordable housing world. And we all work together to encourage the production and preservation of homes that are affordable to people with extremely low, moderate incomes. And we work to foster diverse and sustainable communities through planning and community development. We do our work at the local, state, and federal level. We advocate for opportunity for policies. We work to expand access to housing, and we work to develop the affordable housing field so that we're all learning from each other and are able to really work together to meet our most pressing needs.
Thank you, Rachel. So for our first question for the panel, we've heard from Congresswoman Trahan and State Senator Kennedy to the impact across the nation and state. The question is, could each of the panelists tell us how the housing crisis is impacting the Commonwealth and your sector? Larry, you kind of elaborate a little bit on, you spoke a little bit in your overview of what things you've been doing. Can you share more with us about what the impact is on your organization and across the Commonwealth?
Sure. So I'll speak to what's been happening in the district. In the district, we own properties in Fitchburg, we own properties in Lawrence, at Loft 550, Malden Mills, all throughout the city of Lowell and some other communities. So let's think in terms of four types of residents. We have the residents who have not lost their job and that earn good wages. We have the residents that are on vouchers, Section 8 vouchers that are still getting by, often with lower wages because of reduced hours. And we have people that are moderate income that are paying their rent or attempting to pay their rent in so-called tax credit developments with their own earnings and don't have the benefit of any kind of subsidy. So what's happened? Because of the problem, the pandemic, rent collections are way down. And what does that mean for communities? What does that mean for specific properties? It means the bills can't get paid. It means that mortgage relief may be at hand or necessary relative to a given property. So you have the negative. Oh, and by the way, everybody's at home, so you have increased operating costs, increased water usage, energy usage, and trash removal costs. So that's the negative. On the positive, we've been fortunate at the state level that the state legislature and the governor and the lieutenant governor have been very proactive in coming up with funds to help mitigate the problem. Direct subsidy to residents to help pay the bills, to help pay their rent, to keep them in the units, in their apartment homes. We need more of it. We're not alone in this. The whole industry, be it the large landlord like us, we're the largest operator of affordable housing in the country, and the called mom and pop that owns a two-family house in the city of Lowell or in Greater Lowell, they're impacted as well. And so these resources are necessary to get us over the hump. The hump, we're almost hopefully over the hump with the vaccine coming. We see light at the end of the tunnel, but there's significant financial impact. For us, it's been enormous financial impact. So what can we do? What can we all do is gain more resources at the state level and garner more resources at the federal level by imploring our legislative leaders to make the ask, to work towards a common goal which is obvious, which is to keep people in their homes, keep people healthy, and keep families together, because there's a lot of pain out there that we all want to help mitigate. So I would say more of what we've been doing, more landlords doing what we've been doing would be great as well, which is to keep people in their homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Rachel, could you speak to this?
Yes, like the Congresswoman said, the pandemic is really exposing a lot about the housing crisis that we were already experiencing here in Massachusetts. So there's now a spotlight on housing instability and the disproportionate health and eviction impacts on Black and brown households, and the divide between people with resources and jobs that allow them to work from home and people who do not have the luxury of making those choices. So we all know that housing is expensive in Massachusetts. We constantly rank in the top 10 for being the least affordable for renters and for homeowners. And this is impacting people across income levels. And it certainly hits those with the lowest incomes the hardest. So this results in people being severely rent burdened, leaving little to cover our other needs, whether it be transportation, food, medicine, and other needs that people have. We always talk about people with low incomes being just one emergency away from potentially homelessness or housing instability. And for so many people right now, for tens of thousands of people, it's the pandemic. Senator Kennedy was talking about how many people are worried that they can't pay the rent and are behind. It's over 160,000 households in the state, or about 14% of the state is already behind on their rent. So we now have over 160,000 people who are in a housing emergency in a pandemic with challenging school schedules for kids, varying levels of ability to get to work, food insecurity, and just really everything is compounded right now for so many people. So that's how the pandemic is affecting what was already in place. Did you want me to get into the solution side, or will we hold off on that for now?
We'll hold on. We'll get to that in the next question. Thank you. Connie, could you speak to the housing crisis and impact?
Sure. I, for one, am very much looking forward to the solutions portion of, of our discussion. I think one of the, my fellow panelists have certainly talked about this as well. I think the human impact of this situation has been, the most profound thing I've certainly seen working in social services for a great many years. I think it has laid bare the cracks that we're in across all of our systems. Certainly housing instability, workforce, all the racial issues, education issues, all of those things that I think were recognized as problems. But the pandemic has absolutely put a magnifying glass on that. And we have seen that for so many families here in Massachusetts, absolutely as well across the country, households and families who were making it day to day and making those difficult decisions day to day about balancing need to pay rent, need to feed your kids, need to get to work. They were kind of barely holding it together. And the pandemic has just absolutely taken what was a close to impossible task and turned it into an impossible task. I think, as we kind of gauge the impact and as we try to be part of the response as a community action agency and all the other roles from the community teamwork perspective, I can say that, recognizing that being part of that response, part of that solution, we really have been, I think, I've found it encouraging that from both the state and the federal level, there has been a recognition of just how big a crisis this truly is. I think despite our being in the swirls of a pretty dramatic political environment, there has been over and above a recognition that this goes beyond politics, at least most of the time. And particularly here in the Commonwealth, I have been particularly heartened that the support from the state and the way that they have directed that support in supporting existing programming to be part of that response. I know Senator Kennedy was talking about RAFT, Rental Assistance for Families in Transition, IRMA, the Emergency Rental and Mortgage Assistance Programs. Those are programs that linked into existing infrastructure that has given us a fighting chance of being able to respond quickly as we can, and being able to, support families and households in this environment. So I think when we talk about the impact, it's certainly, it's as I say, profound, but I do also think that there has been a heartening recognition of how we build the programs and the structures to respond in a positive way.
Thank you, Connie. So let's talk about solutions or things that are in the works to really try to address this concern. And I think it'll be helpful for our audience to hear what current plans each of your organizations are implementing or hearing about at the federal, state, or local levels. Rachel, could you lead us off with this one, please?
Sure. It's really challenging right now. Connie was alluding to just the amount of problems people are facing. So we need emergency solutions and we need long-term solutions, because we've got to be able to address the emergency. And, in the emergency side, Larry talked about this too. We need to help people pay their rent. We need to help people pay their mortgages. It's just clear that needs to be done. Requests for assistance are skyrocketing. I'm sure Connie can speak to that. And, the state and communities have really done a lot to put in millions of dollars into RAFT, into local rental assistance programs. But ultimately, we really need the federal government to step in a big way. I think the Congresswoman, for her support of $100 billion for rental assistance, that's the kind of support that we need. In addition, we need to provide resources, like Larry was saying, to ensure that we are preserving our affordable housing stock, that owners of small properties can pay their property taxes and mortgages and maintain the properties and keep people safe, and that our permanent affordable housing that we subsidize is preserved. And we need to ensure that we continue to develop housing throughout this. Before the pandemic, there were proposals before lots of our communities to build housing. That needs to move forward. On the long term, and what we really need to keep working for, we've had a four-pronged strategy for addressing our housing crisis in Massachusetts. One is production. We need to produce far more housing than we've got. Our communities have been really restrictive in our state over the last several years. And that means we don't have enough homes for the people who live here, let alone when people retire and stay put. So this is putting a lot of pressure on the housing we've got. We've got to continue to produce more housing and produce affordable housing. And I do want to thank the Senator for the Senate's action on the economic development bill. Hopefully this emerges from the legislature's conference committee soon. But there are some really great things in that bill for housing production. There's an increase to the low-income housing tax credit. There is a mechanism to make it easier for communities to vote for housing and for housing and zoning changes. So hopefully that moves forward soon. We also need to preserve, again, the affordable housing that we've got, and we need to preserve people's ability to stay in the communities that they've called home, as displacement is occurring. So that's a lot about rental assistance and a lot of resources to help people stay put. We need to also plan for more housing because we need more. The governor has set a goal. Our planning agencies have set goals that we need to reach. We need communities to be planning for where that housing is going to go. And ultimately, we need to work on prosperity. People, that is why we all do this. Connie was talking about the people. It's about the people. The reason why we're working to produce more housing, preserve more housing, plan for more housing, is so that people have the opportunity to prosper, to live to achieve their goals, to live in the communities where they want to live, and to be able to have safe, healthy, affordable housing. So under prosperity, we're working on things like homeownership and closing the racial homeownership gap, economic mobility programs, making it easier for people to increase their incomes when they're on rental assistance programs and in affordable housing, and not fall off a cliff when they start to make more money. So there's a lot of different strategies we need to employ. There's no one magic bullet, but all of these together, we can address the emergency and then the long term at the same time.
Thank you, Rachel. Larry, can you talk a little bit about, you spoke a little bit about some of these before, but can you elaborate on what you already stated?
Sure. First, as a follow-up to Rachel's comments, the state is fortunate to have CHAPA as its advocacy arm or private advocacy arm to garner the resources from the state legislature for housing. It's done a great job over many decades now, particularly under Rachel's leadership. It's really the national model for other groups nationally trying to do similarly to what CHAPA has so successfully done. So congratulations on that, Rachel. So we do our small part. We build housing. A lot of people write about building housing. They talk about building housing. They plan to build housing. We work our you-know-whats off to get it done. It takes public monies. Anybody that thinks it's just expediting zoning to make it happen doesn't work. Most communities in the Commonwealth, you could hand out free land, you could hand out building permits, and you could say, go build housing. The math doesn't work. Here's the math. If you want to serve somebody saying making $40,000 a year, and somebody making $40,000 a year could pay 30% of their income in rent, that's $1,000 a month. Well, $1,000 a month barely pays the operating costs and real estate taxes of that apartment community, of that individual unit within the apartment community. So it takes subsidies. It takes significant subsidies. Arguably, it takes massive amounts of subsidies, $300,000 a unit, $400,000 a unit to solve the problem. The city of Lowell has made big commitments towards helping to solve the problem. Hence, it too has been the benchmark of gateway cities around the Commonwealth. All of what we've done in the community has been mixed income housing. At Boot Mills, we have 80% market, 20% affordable. At Counting House Lofts, we have 50% market, 50% affordable. At what we're building in the Hamilton Canal District at parcels 8 and 9, between the market rate units, between the affordable units and the middle income units is 2/3 affordable. So we need to build more housing. We need to garner more resources. Rachel's mentioned the economic development bill. That puts forth significant more resources into creating new housing. We also need to save the existing housing, because what's happened in so many communities, we all know this exists in Greater Lowell, is communities have been gentrified. Stuff and apartment communities that had been affordable are no longer affordable because the landlords came in and they bought these communities, and the first thing they wanted to do is dramatically raise the rents to take affordable housing and make it non-affordable. So one of our business areas is to lock in such housing, buy and fix up and lock it in as long-term affordable and middle-income housing. We've done that in the city of Lowell. We did that years ago at the old Princeton Village Apartments, now called Redwood Terrace. We did that years ago at in Centerville, in a project called Parkside Apartments off Hildreth and Richardson, and we hope to do more of it. So resources. A lot of what I spend my time doing as the leader of this company of ours is advocating at the federal level for resources. Just now, literally, as we're talking, a text came to me from our Washington contacts saying that we're making some real progress on some of the relief aspects that Congress has been talking about for a while. We're confident that we're going to see some $900 billion, B with a B, coming into relief for housing and related matters. So back to the city of Lowell. The city of Lowell can advocate, Senator Kennedy can advocate for the city on the behalf of his constituents. The Congresswoman can advocate for the district for its and her constituents for more resources that allow us to build product undifferentiated housing, not housing for people that are perceived to be negative in a community, because they're not. Housing for people that all sectors of a community that could build vibrant communities of all incomes for families of all races. We've done it in Lowell. We hope to do more of it in Lowell. We hope to do more of it as part of the Hamilton Canal District expansion. We're doing it as part of Hamilton Canal, work with CTI and others, Lowell Community Development, to continue to do more of what we've been doing. So really the answer is more housing, more immediate relief for those housed so they can pay their rent, and more governmental cooperation to allow for the timeline to be compressed so that aspects of development that should take a year or two at most don't take 9 years. As an example, Malden Mills, we worked on in the city of Lawrence for literally 9 years to create 130 or so units of affordable housing. 9 years. No rational people do this. Most private developers run in the other direction because it is extremely difficult to make these efforts work. Multiple funding sources, multiple interaction with federal, state, and local agencies. We need to simplify the process if we're going to do more of it in as efficient way as possible. So thanks.
Thank you, Larry. Connie, can you speak to this? The question was solutions or current plans that we're implementing.
I appreciate repeating the question.
Thanks.
You know, I will be the first to say that, again, as my fellow panelists are saying, more housing. I mean, there is a certain common sense recognition of the need for more housing at all levels, the need for affordable housing in a truly dramatic way. You know, I will say, just given the perspective that I come from, I also think it's important to recognize that, you know, as we're working with communities and we're working with the people who make up those communities, being able to take a holistic look at families and at individuals as they're kind of, you know, part of our overall community. Housing is a huge part of what lends to stability, opportunities for growth, you know, stable environments for children and all of those other positives. But there is a kind of wraparound that needs to be part of that as well, because I do think that, you know, one of the I think key responses in this particular COVID environment has been that there has been a real flexibility and an ability to pivot, to recognize an emergency, to recognize that this is, you know, you can throw all the unprecedented, new normal, all the words that Mr. Linnehan hates, but are what is where we are. And I think that from, you know, across the nonprofit community, government, there has been a recognition and a response that has been, by most standards, fairly nimble in recognizing that this was an extreme emergency situation and needed to be responded to that way. I think the real critical piece right now, as we do kind of, at least feel like we're starting to make the turn, and we will be moving back, we hope, into a more stable situation, is realizing that as we place so much time and effort and talent and treasure in creating the kind of housing infrastructure that our community and our nation needs, we also need to be recognizing the supports that the families in that housing need. Recognizing that, being able to provide, head of households with solid and high quality financial education, so that the choices they're making, if they are able to move towards home ownership, making sure that those are choices that are well founded and they have the information that they need. Recognizing that workforce development is a critical part of how every family will ultimately achieve self-sufficiency. So investing in those kind of, whether it's training programs or other kind of supports around workforce development, because ultimately that will be what provides better housing options for our families. So I think that our responses in this emergency situation are critically important to helping us kind of, protect and maintain our communities. But I think taking a longer view as well, as, certainly in terms of the housing aspect of it, but also in terms of the other kind of range of services that really, those types of investment can change forever the trajectory for our entire community and ultimately the people and the families who make it up.
Thank you, Connie. So the next question I want to ask is talk about the gaps, and some of you have alluded to this, but out of the solutions and things that are happening and the crisis that we're currently facing, can you talk about some of the gaps that we need to kind of rally around or to support to really kind of get everyone supported as best we can? Connie, can you start this off?
Sure. I think that some of the gaps, again, as we've talked about, they've really kind of bubbled to the surface, I think, in a lot of different ways. But I think as we look at the income disparity, as we look at racial disparity, health access, education access, these are all those building blocks that we recognize are part of a vital and growing economy and community and nation. I see those as kind of those critical gaps, and they warrant connection, recognizing that these aren't disparate things that kind of a family needs to assemble, but recognizing that they really are all connected. They're connected to a housing situation, and all of them kind of contribute to the stability and the progress and forward momentum that a community and that individual families can take moving forward. So I think the key gaps that we recognize are certainly the support and funding for a lot of these programs, but also I think it's a matter of innovation, and us as a community and as a community of whether it's nonprofit, government representatives, or even just the private, including the private sector, in that are being able to make those connections, to streamline those connections, I think is going to be a critical part of our overall recovery. And I certainly hope as we move forward, that's going to be where we see some great innovations and great changes.
Thank you, Connie. Rachel, could you speak to this?
Echo everything Connie just said. And I think that, with policies, we do aim to help as many people as possible. And, and then we see efforts like Win and other developers stepping in and saying, we're going to go even further. We're going to work with our tenants proactively and help them stay housed. And yet there are still people who are going to fall through the cracks. And the gaps really are numerous, the kind of, the things that we need to be thinking about and how to help people that will fall through. So in particular, I'm thinking about Black and brown people that are being disproportionately impacted by the pandemic and by evictions and by employment, communities with high eviction rates. And we see a lot of overlap between high eviction rates, people of color, immigrants, a lot of people who are working in essential jobs and also struggling with housing costs and having to double up, which then, you know, exacerbates the spread of COVID. So this includes communities like Lawrence and Lowell and Chelsea and New Bedford, Brockton. And then there's people who are losing their homes without a formal eviction process. So this is not happening in the WinnDevelopments or the affordable housing developments, but it is happening. There will be people who will be told by their landlord to leave and will not know that they actually can ask for resources. They should have a court process. They should not leave. And then there's also seniors and senior housing providers. You know, we know that seniors are the most vulnerable when it comes to COVID. And there are senior housing providers in public housing, which is our largest senior housing provider in the state, that are spending a lot of resources that they don't necessarily have trying to keep people safe. And then people experiencing homelessness. We have individuals and families who are living in shelter, and we cannot continue to the shelter model. People need housing. Individual shelters can't even function the way that they are because of social distancing. They need to create more space. There's a lot of opportunities, I think, here to look at acquiring old nursing homes or hotels and motels and turning them into single room occupancy units. But there could also be opportunities in a lot of these neighborhoods where, owners may decide to get out of being landlords, and are there triple deckers we could be acquiring and creating new housing opportunities for people? Are there ways that we can support communities in holding on to their neighbors and providing new opportunities there? So it's, there's a lot of people that are falling through the cracks. I think another way that we help them, not just with resources or trying to acquire property, is by working through local networks. When we think about how to really get assistance to people, who do they talk to? They may not know, they may not have accessed these programs before. IRMA is a program that did not exist before and is, open to people who were not eligible for assistance before. We've got to support the really local grassroots organizations and getting the word out and supporting them in supporting people and applying for all of these programs.
Thank you. Larry, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I'll be brief in two additional areas. One is on the homelessness topic. So the industry has recognized, the owners have recognized this problem, this largely unsolvable problem to end homelessness, but has made a dent. About 8 years ago now, leaders in the industry, led by firms like Beacon, Howard Cohen, the Community Builders, POA, Win, a few others, created a nonprofit called New Lease. What New Lease did is it said, hey, we own a lot of housing. Let's take a small portion of what we have and make it available to the formerly homeless. And throughout the Commonwealth now, we've housed approximately 500 families without any direct subsidy from the state or local government. Recognizing what Connie has said is that the housing has to be more than housing people for the most impacted, particularly for the most impacted people. So that's one area. The second is a topic which I think is important to also cover, particularly in the city of Lowell and the surrounding communities. And that is, there are a lot of people, a lot of families that earn more income than what qualifies for affordable housing. At the federal level, if you happen to earn less than 60% of median income, you qualify as affordable housing. Well, if you happen to earn 61 or 62 or 70 or 80 or 90, the marketplace is not delivering housing for you because the math doesn't work to go build housing for somebody making $70,000 a year. By the way, if somebody could figure that out, that would be a great thing to do, but the economics don't work. So that also requires subsidy, less subsidy. So everything is tied for first place: elderly, family, rural, urban, retrofitting, new. But what's key in all of this is to add this additional ingredient of workforce housing, because as the senator knows, or as the congresswoman hears, I'm certain people again, that are doing everything right, that wish to stay in their communities that they grew up in, or wish to retire in the communities that they've lived in. Nobody's building housing for them. And nobody's building housing because the math doesn't work without some element of public subsidy. So at a national level and at a state level, I've taken a leadership role, attempted to take a leadership role in advocating for additional resources, yes, more money, to help solve this problem, so that we can, again, do more than write white papers about we need more workforce housing and more middle income housing, but actually create it. So one of the beauties of what Lowell had in 5.5 million square feet of historic buildings, largely most of it done over the last 20 years by many on this call playing an important role, is building new buildings inside old buildings help solve a lot of the problems of NIMBYism and other aspects that often surface when one is attempting to build affordable and middle-income housing. So those are just 2 additional points that I wish to add. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just have a couple of questions that I think we have time for before we kind of wrap this up. But one of the questions I just wanted to throw out to the panel, anyone can answer this, is can anyone speak to highlighting any expansion efforts in down payment and or closing cost assistance? This moves folks closer to prosperity that we were just talking about.
Yes, there actually is more money in the state budget for down payment assistance. However, it needs to move out of the conference committee and get passed, but there has been more funds made available in this budget year, so we'll keep advocating for that.
Great, thank you. Another one was, can anyone speak to the political, economic, or cultural barriers to increasing affordable housing in communities where people grew up / lived instead of finding themselves priced out of the communities that they grew up in?
This is one of my favorite topics, but I'll let the other panelists answer.
Go for it, Rachel, go for it.
Okay.
Exactly.
For as much as we win in resources at the state and federal level, everything is local. All decisions are made locally. You know, Larry talked about how long it takes to get through the process to create housing. And at CHAPA, we launched a few years ago the Municipal Engagement Initiative, where we're working on the ground in communities to help municipalities, help advocates form coalitions so they can change the conversation around housing and build support for it. There was a study done by BU researchers a year or 2 ago, and it studied land use meetings throughout Eastern Massachusetts. And what it found was only 14% of people who turn out at municipal meetings speak in support of housing production and affordable housing production. Everyone else in those meetings is against it. Now, that doesn't mean that the community is against it, but the people showing up and the people speaking are against it. So we need many more people to be keeping an eye on their planning board meetings, their zoning board meetings, city council, town meetings, and just say something positive about housing, about people, about children. They should have a place in our community. And it's amazing how you can change the dynamics and start to put policies in place that will foster more overall development and more affordable development. It's hugely important. Everybody just show up and say something positive, talk to a neighbor and speak positively about housing. Housing isn't a negative, it adds to our communities, and we need to change that narrative. I could go all day, but I won't.
Yeah. Another question, we've talked a lot about affordable housing throughout this whole program. And, some of the research that I've seen, shows that a person needs to make $24 an hour to cover the expenses of a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment in Massachusetts, right? And we know that minimum wage is, around $12. So going back to, I think, what Rachel said in the beginning, someone has to work 80 hours a week just to afford housing, right? And so can someone speak to the effect that COVID has on the increased cost of housing development costs? And is there what can we do to bring down the costs that we've kind of talked about, bring down the costs of housing so that they can be more affordable for the community?
Could I take that one on, guys? Oh, awesome. So this is obviously an important topic. So housing, we compete in a marketplace. If there's a piece of land or there's a mill building or an old school that needs redevelopment, people are looking at it in a variety of ways. Some are looking at it without regard to affordable housing. They're looking to rent it at the maximum possible rent and make the maximum amount of money. So when we try to go buy that property, we are competing with them for acquisition costs of such property. So that's one factor. Two, in the world of COVID today, costs are up. Costs are up significantly. Construction standards, health-related interface, lumber up significantly, impacting, by the way, impacting not just future developments, but impacting projects underway that had been budgeted to come in at a certain cost that aren't coming in at such cost. The state is full of projects that are stuck on the drawing boards. By the way, if any of those on the call are aware of such, bring them to the attention to developers like us who may be able to help secure resources to bring those over the finish line. There's also the developments that are not just stalled, but they're built and they're failed economically. We took a lead on this topic of if I may, busted developments by turning them in. They're great resources to turn into affordable and middle income housing. Instead of buying that completed building at X, is buy it at a fraction of X. We've done this all throughout the Commonwealth in cities like Everett and Revere and Quincy, and continue to do it today. Effectively, that's how we got involved in some of our Lowell developments. Others had tried and got it to a certain level and couldn't make it work. So it is important to note that one can create affordable and middle income housing, not just by buying a piece of land, hiring an architect, grading plans and go build a building. That's actually the most difficult way and the most lengthy way to build housing, but looking at the existing resource of what communities have. It was mentioned earlier that, the two families and triple deckers, well, we've done a lot of this where we've bought up 20, 30, 40 of these in a community, and we've together created one financing vehicle to buy and fix up and lock in as affordable housing. So creative ways to do it. There are a lot of creative ways to undertake this objective, but costs are a factor. A staggering number to create a unit of housing in the city of Lowell is a $350,000 to $400,000 endeavor for a typical 1,000-foot 2-bedroom unit. That's what it costs. Somebody making even $100,000 a year has difficulty supporting the capital to build such a unit, which is why it's taken so long to get Hamilton Canal off the ground. Sometimes the plans and the ideals don't match with the reality of the marketplace without some form of public subsidies. In the end, it's third-grade math. If construction costs are too high, you create subsidy to effectively bring them down. Thank you.
Thank you. Final question we have is, how do we support those that are falling through the cracks, and how is the community supporting the surge of housing instability needs and the overwhelming numbers seeking services?
I guess I'll dive in on that one if I could. We have talked during our call today about the raft and Irma. These are the kind of here in the Commonwealth, the government's response to this housing crisis, to the ending of the eviction moratorium, and the recognition that there are so many families, so many households that are in danger in this current environment. You know, in a very real world way, I'd like to answer the question, because for so many of you who are in this community and know of families who are struggling and who need assistance, in many cases, maybe families who've never found themselves in a circumstance like this before and may not know how to access the resources that they need. You know, I would just simply say that a referral to community teamwork, where you can find us online, you can, you know, can put our contact information for our specific COVID response hotline, as well as a specific email, is the best way for families who are struggling to get connected, not just to the resources we've talked about today, but to kind of the full range of resources that are available, you know, particularly here in our in the local community, in terms of, you know, helping to rescue those tenancies, helping families who need to reestablish tenancies, helping, you know, families and individuals, you know, who are finding their mortgages in peril right now. And again, I think for so many individuals who have never been in this circumstance, recognizing that this is why these programs exist, so that making the connection to community teamwork, both as the resources we can provide directly, but also in terms of our connections with our nonprofit partners across the region, can be the best real world solution in this emergency time.
Thank you. I know Connie kind of spoke to, you know, community teamwork's information and resources. I don't know if Larry or Rachel have other resources and places that people can go to seek assistance they want to mention.
Well, please, everybody, visit our website, chapa.org, and we have information about assistance programs, so connecting people to CTI and the other regionals in the state, but also information on what's happening with the state budget, with other policies that are moving, because these are the things that we need, you know, so that these programs are funded.
You know, one additional point to mention, there's two principal groups of residents in these communities. One that are working with their owners, their landlords, their property management companies to access these resources, recognizing that they have a problem, a financial problem, not caused by them, of course, and seeking the resources that Connie and Rachel mentions. There's a whole nother set of people that are running and hiding and not making themselves connected to the resources, arguably foolishly, because they're building up enormous balances. They could go get resources if they were to be asking for them. And in many an environment, the landlords are going to only end up with one solution, which is ultimate eviction. So I would think from a housing advocacy point of view, to the extent CHAPA, which is, I think, doing this, and Community Teamwork, which I believe was doing this as well, continues to push residents who are impacted to seek the assistance. These application forms are enormously complicated to fill out and to garner the resources. The time takes time and effort and assistance, even for people that aren't impacted, but people that are under the stress of job loss and all that comes with it. We need the communities to reach out to people that are known impacted families and let them help themselves, because we as landlords, we as owners, are not allowed to go get the resources for them. It's unfortunate. We've been advocating for that, but it's essential to seek the help that's available to it, particularly if more help is coming from, hopefully over the next month, from the federal government under CARES. Keep people in the unit, in their dwelling unit is priority number one.
I just want to back up what Larry's saying. We really all need to reach out to our own networks and encourage people to ask for help and help people get the help they need. CHAPA is advocating along with CTI and others to make the application processes easier for people. And we are advocating for landlords to be able to access the programs. But the most important thing is that we all reach out to anybody we know, anybody who could be struggling, and offer help and encourage them to apply for help. Because Larry's right, we don't want people, even if we have moratorium in place, if you're building up a giant arrearage, there's only going to be one option at that point. So we all need to work together to help prevent that.
I would also add just, for some of our smaller landlords, there is going to be a new program that's rolling out next week for landlords with 20 units or less that will allow them to access the RAF program to address rental arrearages for their tenants. So there's certainly a recognition that, from the landlord perspective, we are trying to build a response, in their direction as well.
Thank you. One of the questions in the chat that's coming up is around are there kind of community meetings regarding housing? I just wanted to address that real quick. Yes, Community Teamwork has a monthly meeting for the Merrimack Valley Housing Consortium that Barbara Warren leads. So there's probably individuals and providers on this that want to participate in that so that they're getting information on a routine basis. So what I'll do is I'll get the list of all the participants of this, and then I'll share that with Barbara so she can reach out and share that information so that you can participate in those meetings moving forward. Just in closing, I just want to thank all of our panelists for taking the time out of their day to participate. They've shared resources, challenges, and ways we can support our community and those experiencing housing instability. I'd like to call Jay Linnehan back to provide closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. And I want to thank everybody who's been on the call and listened today. I think one of the things that's pretty obvious is we need more money and we need more communication. And hopefully all the folks that are on this call can help provide a little bit of that to help the folks that need it the most. It is going to be a difficult road, as I've mentioned earlier, as we go down this. And I think collectively we can work and abate what we hopefully won't be as much of a crisis as it could possibly turn out to be. I want to thank, I mentioned earlier about the money that the foundation has given out since March. And I want to make sure that I thank the folks that participated in putting their philanthropy through the Greater Lowell Community Foundation so we could do that. And I'm going to thank in advance donors that have yet to do that, who are very, very compassionate about taking care of people with housing. And I think, the bottom line with respect to housing is it facilitates and exacerbates so many health issues with people across the spectrum. Many people think folks end up being homeless because of mental health or addiction. And to some degree that's true, but oftentimes it's that those things are precipitated by being homeless or by being rent burdened and having all the stress that goes with that. So, more housing, assisting more folks with housing obviously is a key thing that we want to assist going forward. I had said earlier that it's all about friends helping friends, particularly in the season that we have in front of us, this holiday season. I want everyone to know the Greater Lowell Community Foundation is a friend for you. We will be here. I think I can speak for my colleagues that are on the line, the folks that have already spoken. They are there to help reach out. If anybody wants to reach me, if there's questions that they have that weren't answered, it's jay@glcffoundation.org. Again, just Google the foundation, you'll find us. I also want to let folks know that this whole piece was recorded, and we'll post this tomorrow. So if you like to listen to me today and you want to listen to me again tomorrow, you can do that, or anybody else that spoke. And I'm pretty sure you can fast forward over people that you might not have liked listening to. But again, thank you all for joining us on I jest a little bit, but obviously this is a very serious issue. And I am hopeful, as I noted more than once, that collectively we can help have an impact so that this crisis is averted and the folks that are the most vulnerable in our community, we can help. Any questions that folks have, any support they want to provide, we're all here to help you do that. Again, thank you all for being with us today. I wish you all the best as the holiday season in front of us unfolds. Thank you all very much. Have a great day.